In this episode, we build the idea that risk management is not a single event you complete and then forget, but a continuous discipline that follows a system from the first spark of an idea all the way to the moment it is retired and removed. Beginners often imagine risk management as something you do when the system is almost finished, like a final inspection before you ship a product. But security engineering works differently because most of the risk is shaped by early decisions. Once architecture choices are locked in, data flows are established, and dependencies are chosen, you can still add controls, but you cannot easily undo fundamental exposure. Integrating risk management throughout the lifecycle means you put risk thinking where it has leverage, including early concept discussions, design trade-offs, implementation decisions, operational changes, and end-of-life planning. The goal is not to slow everything down. It is to reduce surprises, make decisions defendable, and keep the system's risk posture aligned with mission needs as reality changes. If you learn to see risk as something that evolves with the system, you will also learn why strong organizations treat risk management as a habit, not a hurdle. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start with the concept phase, because this is where systems are still flexible and where risk can be reduced cheaply. In the concept phase, the system may be only an idea, a proposal, or a plan to replace or improve something that already exists. Risk management here focuses on scope, purpose, and assumptions, such as what problem the system is solving, what data it will handle, and how critical it will be to mission outcomes. Early risk questions include whether the system will be exposed to the internet, whether it will depend on third parties, whether it will require privileged access, and whether it will become a critical dependency for other services. At this stage, you may not have detailed designs, but you can still identify major risk drivers and decide whether the idea is even viable given the organization's risk appetite. You can also decide which success criteria matter most, such as confidentiality for sensitive records or availability for a mission-critical workflow. By integrating risk thinking at concept time, you avoid building momentum behind a plan that is unrealistic, unsafe, or too expensive to secure. As you move into requirements and early design, risk management shifts from broad questions to more structured decisions about what the system must achieve and what constraints it must respect. Requirements are often where risk management becomes real because they translate mission needs into expectations for behavior, controls, and evidence. A key beginner lesson is that security requirements should not appear as an afterthought. They should be connected to the system's purpose and the risks identified in concept. If the system will handle sensitive data, requirements might include strict access control outcomes, logging expectations, and protections for data in storage and transit. If the system must be available, requirements might include resilience expectations and recovery objectives. Risk management at this phase also includes identifying who will own the risk decisions, because requirements often create work for multiple teams, not just security. When requirements are shaped by risk context, they become more than a wish list. They become a prioritized set of obligations that can be tested and defended. During architecture and detailed design, risk management becomes a decision support process for trade-offs, because design choices create both protections and exposures. Architecture defines trust boundaries, data flows, identity relationships, and dependencies, and each of those has risk implications. For example, choosing to centralize a function might simplify management but create a single point of failure, while decentralizing might improve resilience but increase complexity and error risk. Selecting a third-party service might reduce development effort but introduce supply chain risk and dependency on vendor support. Risk management here is about evaluating options and choosing a design that meets mission goals while keeping exposure acceptable. This is also where you plan for defense layers, monitoring visibility, and recovery pathways, because building those into the architecture is easier than bolting them on later. When risk management is integrated into design, it becomes part of engineering reasoning rather than a separate compliance activity. As the system moves into implementation and build, the risk focus shifts toward execution quality, change control, and verification that the design intent is actually being realized. Beginners sometimes think if the design includes security features, the implementation will naturally follow, but real systems drift because people are busy and details get missed. Risk management at this stage includes ensuring that components are built and configured according to intended baselines, that access is managed appropriately during development, and that secrets and credentials are handled safely. It also includes ensuring that testing covers security-relevant behavior, such as whether access control boundaries work as expected and whether logging actually captures meaningful events. The point is not to turn developers into security specialists, but to ensure that the system is not quietly accumulating risk through small shortcuts. Integrated risk management means you have checkpoints that catch deviations early when they are still easy to fix. It also means you maintain traceability, so you can connect requirements to designs and designs to implemented controls without relying on memory. When a system is being deployed and transitioned into operational use, risk management becomes especially important because the system starts interacting with real users, real data, and real mission demands. The transition phase often introduces temporary risk because teams are learning, workflows change, and assumptions get tested by reality. Risk management here includes validating that operational controls are in place, such as monitoring, incident response procedures, backup and recovery processes, and access governance. It also includes confirming that staff know their responsibilities and that the system can be supported during normal operation and during stress events. A common risk at deployment is misconfiguration, where a small setting creates a large exposure, so careful validation is essential. Another risk is incomplete integration, where the system operates but does not feed logs to the right places or does not enforce identity policies consistently. Integrated risk management treats deployment not as a finish line, but as a controlled introduction of risk into the operating environment, with specific checks to confirm readiness. Once the system is in steady-state operations, risk management becomes a continuous cycle of monitoring, learning, and adjusting, because the environment around the system never stays still. Threats evolve, software updates change behavior, new integrations are added, user populations change, and business priorities shift. Risk management in operations includes tracking vulnerabilities, evaluating change requests, reviewing incidents and near misses, and measuring whether controls remain effective over time. It also includes managing risk introduced by maintenance activities, because patches and configuration updates can improve security while also risking outages if not handled carefully. For beginners, it helps to understand that operational risk is not only attacker-driven. It includes human error, process breakdowns, and dependency failures. Integrated risk management creates routines that keep the system aligned with acceptable risk posture, such as periodic reviews of access, periodic checks of logging coverage, and periodic testing of recovery plans. Without that routine, risk accumulates quietly until a failure exposes it. An important lifecycle integration point is major change, such as adding a new feature, integrating a new vendor, moving to a new hosting environment, or expanding the system to new users or data types. Major changes often reset the risk picture because they introduce new trust relationships and new attack paths. Risk management must therefore be part of change management, not a separate after-the-fact activity. This means changes should be evaluated for their effect on confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and controls should be adjusted accordingly. It also means that when a change is approved, the decision and its rationale are recorded so it can be defended later. A beginner lesson here is that change is one of the most common causes of security incidents and outages, not because change is bad, but because change is complex. Integrated risk management makes change safer by requiring that risk considerations be explicit and by ensuring that monitoring and response plans are updated to match new reality. Lifecycle risk management also includes the human dimension, because systems are operated by people who learn, forget, rotate roles, and sometimes make mistakes under pressure. Over time, staff turnover can erode knowledge about why certain controls exist or how to respond when something breaks. Risk management must therefore include documentation, training, and clear responsibility assignments that survive individual transitions. This is not about writing massive manuals. It is about capturing essential decisions, assumptions, and procedures in a way that new staff can understand. It also includes making sure that incident response and recovery processes are practiced so that MTD and MTT remain acceptable, rather than becoming slow because no one remembers what to do. Integrated risk management recognizes that people are part of the system, and people-related risk can be as significant as technical vulnerabilities. When the human side is neglected, controls may exist on paper but fail in real events. Now consider the later stages of a system's life, such as sustainment and eventual retirement, because many organizations forget that disposal is a major risk moment. As systems age, vendors may reduce support, patches may slow, and dependencies may become brittle. Risk management at this stage includes assessing whether the system can still be maintained securely and whether compensating controls are needed when full support is no longer available. It also includes planning migrations carefully, because migrations can expose data, create gaps in monitoring, or lead to temporary parallel systems that expand attack surface. Disposal risk management includes ensuring that data is handled properly, that credentials and keys are revoked, that integrations are removed cleanly, and that residual components are not left running unnoticed. A system that is supposedly retired but still reachable on the network is a classic hidden risk. Integrating risk management through disposal means you treat retirement as a controlled process with clear accountability, not a hurried cleanup after a replacement goes live. A helpful way to tie the life cycle together is to think of risk posture as something that should be continuously known, not guessed. Early phases establish the intended posture through requirements and design, and later phases maintain or adjust that posture through operations and change. When the system deviates, risk management detects the deviation, evaluates impact, and decides on corrective action or risk acceptance. This creates continuity, which prevents the common situation where the system is considered secure at launch and then quietly degrades. It also supports better governance because leadership can see how risk decisions were made over time rather than treating every new concern as an isolated crisis. For beginners, the important takeaway is that risk management is a life cycle conversation, and every phase has its own typical risks and typical leverage points. When you know where leverage exists, you can focus effort where it reduces the most risk for the least cost. The central lesson is that integrating risk management throughout the life cycle is how organizations keep security connected to reality, rather than treating it as a one-time approval step. Concept and design phases shape the system's fundamental exposure. Build and deployment phases test whether intent becomes reality. Operations phases manage drift and change, and disposal phases prevent old systems from becoming forgotten entry points. When risk management is present at each stage, decisions become more consistent, assumptions are revisited, and controls evolve with the system instead of falling behind. This approach reduces both dramatic incidents and slow, creeping risk accumulation because it creates feedback loops and accountability over time. If you adopt this mindset early, you will be able to reason about security as a system property that must be maintained across years of change. That is what it means to treat risk management as an integrated engineering discipline from concept to disposal.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.